In this video, we're taking a look at offshore banking in UK territories. Now, offshore banking in the UK is a bit of a misnomer. While it is possible for non-residents to bank in the UK, especially in private banking, offshore banking in the UK is found offshore. Just a short 60-minute flight from London, and you can find three of the top offshore banking jurisdictions in existence today: the Crown Dependencies of Jersey, Guernsey, and the Isle of Man. Now, while these three little island territories are not actually part of the UK, instead they are actually territories for which the UK is responsible for. This makes the Crown Dependencies unique when compared to the British Overseas Territories, which are constitutionally tied to the UK. Of course, British Overseas Territories can present interesting offshore banking options as well. In fact, these territories include some of the most popular offshore banking hubs today, including the Cayman Islands, Bermuda, British Virgin Islands, Anguilla, and Gibraltar. In this video, we'll explore both categories of offshore banking in the UK, the Crown Dependencies and the British Overseas Territories. This will include an overview of the banking options, the type of clients each territory caters to, and how you can start opening accounts today. But before we get started, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you get alerted every time we post new non-resident banking opportunities. Now, to help you get started with offshore banking in UK territories, we have a free non-resident banking starter guide. It's designed to help non-resident and foreigners open bank accounts. So don't forget to download your copy using the link in the description below. Here's a little offshore banking in the UK 101. The City of London is entirely responsible for the offshore banking industry in the Crown Dependencies and British Overseas Territories. In fact, if it wasn't for the city, many of these islands would still be rural agricultural outposts, or maybe territories of Amsterdam or the US instead. It all started when the city expanded in the mid-1900s. That's when London bankers established financial centers in the Caribbean, Indian Ocean, and even closer to home in the Irish Sea and English Channel. These financial outposts were not only extensions of the British Empire, they propelled British finance ahead of the global competition, ensuring that the City of London was always a few steps ahead. In fact, it's no stretch of the imagination to say that the entire offshore financial system was engineered and steered from the beating heart of UK finance, London, though historically the city would deny such influence. Then, after Britain proved its model for offshore finance, other nations such as the Netherlands, France, and the US began to mimic their efforts. This created a global network of offshore banking and corporate registration that ushered in a new world of tax efficiency, asset protection, and high finance. Today, many of the benefits that originally attracted people to these islands, like tax evasion, anonymous companies, banking secrecy, and more, no longer exist. This is the direct result of banking secrecy being torn to shreds, the introduction of information sharing agreements like BACA, CRS, and AEOI, global obsession with public registries, thanks to the Panama Papers scandal, and stiffer regulations around the world. But don't be discouraged. Offshore banking through the UK and its territories still offers plenty of opportunities. In fact, clients with the right information can still protect their assets, increase tax efficiencies, and even obtain second passports, all from an offshore bank account. The question is, how do you choose where to open accounts? So where do you even start with offshore banking in the UK? Today, despite their historical and constitutional ties, the territories that make up the Crown Dependencies and British Overseas Territories compete directly with one another. They compete to attract banks, professional service providers, law firms, investment funds, insurance behemoths, multinationals, trusts, and of course, customers for all of the above. These are the essential ingredients that keep their island economies humming. Of course, certain islands have carved out key areas of expertise, insulating them from direct competition. For example, Cayman has developed a knack for attracting bank booking centers and major hedge funds, becoming the fifth largest banking sector in the world with over $1.9 trillion in US in deposits. The British Virgin Islands have become the company registration jurisdiction of choice for the offshore world, resulting in over 400,000 companies being registered there. And then you have Anguilla, the lowest cost option for corporate registration. Of course, there are many other offshore banking options in UK territories to consider, and there's more to Cayman, BVI, and Anguilla than their deposits, companies registered, or cost. So to help answer the question, where should I open a bank account, we'll look at each of the offshore satellites in a moment and share some of the insights where they excel and where they fail. First, let's take a look at offshore banking in Guernsey. Guernsey's financial services industry caters to wealth management, trust and foundations, insurance companies, funds, and bond issuers. Now, not surprisingly, most local service providers focus on financial services and various facets of trust administration and management, corporate formation, structuring, investment advisory, captive insurance entities, and related services. Thanks to Guernsey's low taxes, beneficial laws, clean image, and high concentration of specialized financial services, it's a popular jurisdiction for institutional investors and individuals with significant wealth. Today, there are over 20,000 trusts registered in Guernsey. 30% of Europe's junk bonds are issued here, and Guernsey is an important launching pad for companies planning to list on the London Stock Exchange. So there's a lot happening. When it comes to banking, Guernsey is a destination for private banking and wealth management services provided to high net worth individuals, ultra high net worth individuals, their businesses, and assorted wealth planning vehicles. In some cases, it's possible to access certain non-resident and expat banking services ranging from standard international bank accounts and wealth management to international mortgages for property in the UK. However, banks are selective, so choosing the right place to apply is critical. Overall, Guernsey offshore banking is a good fit for those in higher wealth brackets who are willing to make fairly decent-sized deposits and use the bank's services. It's also a useful hub for Guernsey-administered entities, those using the island's financial services, as well as people and companies who have ties or assets in or connected to the UK. Next, let's take a look at offshore banking in the Isle of Man. The Isle of Man is often seen as the more cost-effective offshore banking option among the Crown dependencies. That's because some Isle of Man banks are easier to access and allow lower deposits than those banks in Guernsey or Jersey. That said, it can still be challenging to open offshore accounts in the Isle of Man if you don't have the right client profile or don't take bank selection seriously. Choosing the wrong bank can result in lost time, money, and a whole lot of frustration. The Isle of Man is best suited to non-residents and expats living outside of their home countries, as well as UK nationals and those with UK ties. For these groups, the Isle of Man can offer stable banking in a first world jurisdiction with far less stigma than banking in the Caribbean. Of course, there are other important variables that you need to consider, and opening an Isle of Man bank account isn't available to everyone. But if you have the right information, contacts, and know which banks to approach, opening offshore bank accounts here 100% remotely is entirely possible. Next, offshore banking in Jersey. When it comes to non-resident and expat banking, Jersey is often seen as a halfway point between the Isle of Man and Guernsey, at least when it comes to deposit requirements. If you're able to muster the £25,000 deposit, Jersey could be worth considering. If you plan on depositing less, then you may want to consider the Isle of Man instead. On the other hand, if you're interested in depositing a whole lot more, all three islands will have options available, and the best choice will boil down to whether you plan on banking personally or through a structure such as a trust, company, or foundation, and what services you need. If you're interested in opening a Jersey bank account, bank and banker selection are critical. Knowing which bank is best suited for your specific client profile is also extremely key. This is important since not all banks are interested in dealing with non-residents, offshore companies, and transactional banking. Next, let's move over to British Overseas Territories and check out offshore banking in Anguilla. Many of the other islands on this list started establishing themselves as major players in the offshore world between the 1960s and the 1980s. But not Anguilla. Anguilla was drowning in conflicts, political unrest, and busy fighting off coups. In fact, the country didn't even achieve independence until 1982. So, to put it lightly, Anguilla was very late to the offshore game. Now, how does this impact offshore banking in Anguilla? Well, all of the other countries on the list had a 15 to 20 year head start. For example, when Cayman was being called the Geneva of the Caribbean, most people didn't even know Anguilla was a country. So it's no surprise that Anguilla's offshore service industry is underdeveloped and banking options are limited. So if you're in need of offshore banking, there are better options elsewhere. The one thing Anguilla does have going for it, however, are strong British ties, UK-inspired laws, and tax haven status. But without any niche or specialization to sell, Anguilla remains a lower price company formation hub. For this reason, if you're considering Anguilla as an option for offshore banking in a territory tied to the UK, consider other options first. Next, offshore banking in Bermuda. Bermuda is one of the most reputable offshore financial centers in the entire world today. So it's no surprise that people look to Bermuda for offshore banking. However, for most people, Bermuda isn't the best choice. And that's because Bermuda caters to multinationals, insurance companies, listed entities, trusts, and other companies used for wealth management. So it should be noted that banks in Bermuda tend to favor opening accounts for these entities. Of course, there are some banking options available for non-residents and foreign companies, but they tend to require higher minimum deposits, higher annual turnover, and cater to individuals interested in wealth management. In other words, offshore banking options in Bermuda are limited when compared to the other territories we've already covered in this video. For this reason, most individuals look to Bermuda for structuring 100-year trusts and forming exempted companies before opening accounts. Now, if you want more information on opening accounts in Bermuda for yourself, a trust, or a company, you can join GlobalBanks Insider and get direct access to our team to support your needs by clicking the link below. Next, offshore banking in the British Virgin Islands. While the British Virgin Islands are synonymous with the offshore world, they actually have very little to do with offshore banking and finance. In fact, less than 1% of offshore financial activities can be traced back to banks in the British Virgin Islands. Instead, this tiny Caribbean nation is internationally renowned for corporate structuring, offshore companies, and its private company registry. In other words, the ownership of companies in the BVI is a private matter. That is until the public registry comes into effect in 2023. With all that being said, there are a few banks in the British Virgin Islands that do offer offshore banking. And not surprisingly, this includes a few of the regional players that exist in other parts of the Caribbean as well, with some exceptions. In most cases, when considering offshore banking in the UK or one of the UK affiliated territories mentioned in this video, you'll find better options outside the British Virgin Islands. And if you have a BVI company and are struggling to open an account, it's worth noting that there are other viable options available in other top banking hubs. Next, offshore banking in the Cayman Islands. Now, Cayman is widely seen as one of the most important international banking hubs in the world. It has deep roots in offshore finance and acts as an extension of the City of London's offshore network. Cayman is the world's 5th largest financial center, home to 75% of the world's hedge funds, and has $674 billion US on deposit. Not too bad for a country of less than 60,000 people. Now, like most of the territories mentioned in this video, the benefits of an offshore bank account in the Cayman Islands include strong asset management and wealth management. But there is one major difference when it comes to banking in Cayman versus other jurisdictions. It's very difficult to get in, kind of like a swanky nightclub. Cayman Islands banks now require and strongly enforce existing ties to the country. That means you or your company are required to have clear and obvious ties to the Cayman Islands. Of course, exceptions are possible. Ties can be acquired, and some banks and bankers may be willing to accommodate looser ties than others depending on your profile. Prospective clients should expect to deposit at least $50,000 to $100,000 US when opening an offshore account here. But amounts vary and ultimately depend on the bank and banker you approach for account opening. Next, offshore banking in Gibraltar. Finally, we come to Gibraltar. Now, in the world of offshore banking, Gibraltar seems to have faded into the background over the last few years. And there's a good reason for that, which we'll share in a moment. But first, it's worth noting that Gibraltar is best known for its non-resident companies as a territorial tax jurisdiction in Europe that can lead to UK citizenship, and as a safe and stable place to live and bank. So it's no surprise that banks in Gibraltar specialize in private banking and wealth management services for high net worth individuals, non-residents, companies, and trusts. Of course, part of the attraction to Gibraltar is that it offers a solid reputation and doesn't suffer from tax haven stigma anymore. Unfortunately, Gibraltar is becoming significantly more difficult to access for non-residents looking to open offshore bank accounts. That is, unless you're looking to open a mid-six-figure account with one of the available private banking options. Now, those looking for transactional-based banking in Gibraltar will either need ties or a Gibraltar registered entity. And those willing to consider banking alternatives can also consider Gibraltar-based fintechs or licensed EMIs. That said, if you're taking your first step into offshore banking, don't have any ties to the UK or Gibraltar, and are looking to make a deposit below £500,000, you may want to consider one of the other jurisdictions that we've talked about already in this video. All right, let's get started with offshore banking in the UK and beyond right now. If you want to unlock the best offshore banking options in the UK and beyond, determine which jurisdictions are best for you, sort out your banking options, or choose banks that cater to your client profile, we can help. With GlobalBanks Insider, you'll get instant access to our entire archive of banking intelligence reports. access to the GlobalBanks database, home to more than 250 banks from 50 plus countries, including detailed bank profiles, client preferences, and a whole lot more. Finally, you'll also get real-time analyst support from our team of experts, ready to answer your most pressing banking questions and to make suggestions on which strategies to use in offshore banking in UK territories and elsewhere to help meet your objectives. To get started, just click the link in the description below to learn more about GlobalBanks Insider. And before signing off, don't forget to hit subscribe so you get alerted every time we share new banking opportunities. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.